Hi, this is Jordi from Agents at Work, and today I have the pleasure to be with Thais Castello, Head of Marketing and Strategy at Exa.
Hello. So great to be here.
Hi, Thais. Yeah, as I was saying, I am a big fan of Exa, so I am really happy to be able to interview you today. When did you join Exa?
So I joined a little over a year ago, right before the Series A.
For people who don't know Exa, what does Exa do?
So we're basically building a search engine for AI agents. So instead of basically being a search engine for humans like Google, it's the first search engine in the world that's built for AI use cases.
I studied computer science, and one problem that has been there since the 50s is search. So it seems that it's something that it's like the backbone of what we want machines to do. And even after 70 years, we still are able to say like, well, this is still like a hard problem. So when the internet happened, that problem became even bigger. Like we had databases for local stuff, but the internet was like huge distributed database. So how do you ingest that content? And Google seemed that they found something there. It was PageRank, and they were like, well, there's all this, but we need to organize and search. PageRank can help us there. Why do LLMs need a different kind of search? Why can't we use anything that we invented in the last 70 years?
That's a great question. And we got that question a lot of like, why are you working on search? Like, hasn't Google solved this? And I think the reality is everything's about incentives in a lot of ways. And Google is really built for consumers. And especially the way that the company evolved and the business model evolved is they're optimizing for clicks, right? They're optimizing for you as a person to search for something in very few keywords also because humans tend to be lazy when we type and getting links and kind of clicking on those links and making Google ad revenue, right? So their main goal is A, that the first link, whether it's from ads or from the page ranks, and that's really, really good. Versus for agents, the reality is they don't want like one listicle that summarizes the answer of what they're looking for. They want raw information. They can ingest a lot of it, and they want a lot more control and precision over what information to find. So it just requires a very different logic behind search that's a lot more meaning based, but also that has all these different properties of customization. Rather, consumers just want kind of something quick and that summarizes it a good enough amount.
Yeah, their mission was really principled. It was something like to organize and catalog the knowledge of the world. And then it really resonates with me. And then I remember like in 2015 or so when I was using them and I was like, well, 70% of what I see in the main page, it's ads. How is this helping to organize and catalog the knowledge of the world? And something that is also really noticeable for people, it's the evolution of keywords. So
Yeah.
basically, Google is a keyword engine. So if you want, like we have been trained to say like, well, I want to search for shoes and I have to put like shoes, Vancouver, men, wedding. This is something that now many people has interiorized. But if you find someone in the 2000, in the early 2000s and you tell them like ask the computer something, you notice that they were really bad at searching. Actually, my
Mhm.
dad doesn't know how to use search on Google. And you can see that he just doesn't find the right keywords. However, LLMs, like, do they use keywords or is there any other kind of technology that we can leverage there?
That's a very good point, and I think you're so right. And I think we're in the middle of this wave of basically retraining of behavior because we have been trained as a whole society on searching in this super short random keyword format to kind of try to find the thing we want versus describing it in long form, which is way more how now we're being trained to talk to right ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini. And the way that these agents work is they can then also produce the full, let's say, question or longer form keywords, especially the way that they tend to search on the web to go and fetch those answers. So I think, yeah, the way that both us as humans are querying ChatGPT or any type of chatbot, and then the way that these chatbots are going and querying the web is very different than what Google trained us on. So it will just require this shift in mentality of what's even possible and how to even go about searching for it.
Something that is really noticeable for me is that I never queried people as I query Google. So
Yeah.
I never asked my wife, socks, drawer, clean. I would never do that. I would ask like, where are the socks or something like that. However, with LLMs, like that's how people are using them. Is there anything there that, like you can leverage? Like what kind of technology? Like why can't Google do it or why wasn't Google doing it before and we can do it today?
Yeah. So I think it goes back to the fundamental premise of how those search engines work. So Google works primarily based on keywords, meaning it looks at the exact words you're using and finds documents on the web, meaning websites that contain those exact words. It's not looking based on meaning. It doesn't actually understand what you're saying, and it doesn't actually understand what's on all of these websites. Of course, like now it's evolved a bit beyond that, but I think the way we're thinking about it and the way I think it works really well for LLMs is meaning-based search, meaning, yes, you combine these keywords that are crucial for the search, but also you're actually understanding on a semantic level, what is that whole document saying? What's the context of this? And especially when you're searching for things that are more semantic heavy, even in the example of like the socks that you gave. So if you're trying to find like cool AI startups in SF working on robotics, like that can mean many things. And a startup wouldn't describe themselves as a cool AI startup working on robotics, right? So not necessarily those words would be present. And you kind of need a system that's more intelligent to understand, okay, what do these companies say or what do these pages say? Yes, matching that on a semantic level to the query that the user's having. So yes, I think one, we will see a shift of searching in a way that is closer to this like English style searching and like way that we're talking to ChatGPT. But in the back end, how does the search infrastructure and search technology need to change to then be able to also suffice those queries in a good way, right? To like answer those queries actually in a helpful way. Like if you type in this long form on Google, like it won't work great. So you need a different system to go about it.
Well, you can see it even like when you want to add more things to Google. Like usually, the more you add to a query, the
Mm-hmm.
worse it goes. And with this technology, the more you add to the query, the LLM, the better it is to say like, oh yeah, I know now what you mean. I can find like more stuff. Like I
Exactly.
wasn't able to add a document, for example, to a Google query. I cannot say like
Exactly.
cool startups like these ones.
And yeah, I guess just to explain to folks a little bit of how Exa works. So basically, we train our own model, we build our own index, and basically what we do is we ingest all of the documents in the web and turn them into embeddings. So we're able to basically capture all of the semantic understanding of those websites. And then whenever we're doing this search, yeah, we can, find results based on keywords, but also on that full kind of vector matching and cosine similarity there. So that's a little bit of how we're going about it. And you're right that like long queries don't work well at all on Google. So I'll give you a random example, but we see actually a lot of like PhD students and researchers using Exa to search for research papers because you can paste like the whole abstract and be like, find me papers similar to this, or find me papers that agree with this idea or disagree with this idea. And we can kind of like capture that, which you can never do before with Google. So I think what really excites me is all the possibilities of ways that we're actually going to be able to access humanities knowledge. And to your point, like on the original mission of how do you organize all of humanities information, that's such a big problem and such a big mission. And realistically, like right now, we're almost like trying to find the needle in the haystack
Yeah.
with very rudimentary tools. And we know the information's out there, right? You know the result you're looking for is out there. You just can't find it. Like you don't know how to prompt it in the right way to get the thing you want, even though you know it exists. And it shouldn't be this hard. Like it should be easier for you as a person and for AI agents to access this information with a simple question. So
And something that I noticed that it's also a big jump from like just keyword matching to semantics and embeddings. It's this idea of chaining searches. So search is not
mm,
usually like I search something, you come back with the results and it's like, okay, so this is it. Like usually the results of a search actually trigger more questions. And in Google, there is nothing that you can do to incorporate the learnings from the previous search. So
mm,
after I have done a search, I need to start with a clean state. Like I cannot say like, well, given that I learned all this on the previous search, the second one will start with that state. With embeddings and Exa, like I have seen like how you can start with a query, be able to retrieve a lot of information, distillate it, and then trigger another query that it's even better.
yeah. So I think, and this relates a lot to I think how people tend to use something like Access. So like again, we're not building this for consumers, right? Like we're purely B2B. Like we're building this for AI agents. So basically our customers are companies that are either like AI for startups or big companies building AI features, and they plug in whatever AI system they have to Exa, and we kind of become the, let's say, the flow of information from the web to their LLMs. So what's cool is this LLM gets to absorb all of the data of like the first 10 results. They can customize it. So like 5, 10, 100, 1,000 results if they want, and use then all this information and kind of like continuously query Exa in a series of questions if that's how they set up the agent to do it. So it's super customizable. And because it's not just like pure search, right? You're also like working in conjunction with these like intelligent LLMs. There's a lot of cool stuff that you I think even the way that we think about it is like, yeah, there are use cases in which you want a very simple, fast search. So you want like low latency, low compute. It's use cases that require that instant data versus there are use cases for very valuable questions that you're willing to wait a little longer and you want this like high compute, higher latency search, but that can solve very hard things that usually you would never be able to find with a traditional search engine. And that with like this combination of search and an intelligent agentic system, you can retrieve pretty much anything on the web. So like, let's say if you're trying to find software engineers in the Bay Area that worked in big startups and worked in large tech companies and have contributed to an open source project and have a GitHub with more than 10 stars. If you try to search for that on a traditional search engine, like it would never return what you're looking for, but we can basically almost like break down that query into specific criteria to understand what you actually want, go and find multiple sources to validate if that's true or not, and return a result that's like perfectly verified. So that's just something that is a little bit of a glimpse of, I guess, what we need to retrain our brains on what's going to be possible in all the different use cases that before you couldn't solve with search, but now you can. Like you used to have to like tag all this data and build these very stale data sets that were all pre-tagged. And now you can just have this like a live feed where almost like querying the web as a database, right? And you get that information in a very live way, but also very precise at the same time. So it's super cool.
Yeah, I really like this idea of the web as a database. So this idea
Mm-hmm.
of like with Exa, I am able to extract knowledge of the living web that I do not
Yeah.
control, and I can able to find whatever it's needed there. How are people like? What kind of patterns are they using when they are building agents that need search? So it's just like a big agent that then always take one query, launches one search, and returns it, or launch like multiple sub
Mm-hmm.
agents, and it's more like deep research that they tell you like, okay, so yeah, the search already finished after 20 minutes. How are people using it?
There's very different use cases. So we have a few use cases that are very instant. So let's say think a consumer app that has some type of like chat feature within it that wants to be able to pull live recommendations from the web to send to the user. You need that to be very instant. So it's probably like one search, max two, that it's going fetching those results, quickly summarizing it and giving it to the user. So that's fast. We have other customers, let's say think a big consulting firm or a big finance firm that sometimes want to run not even just reports, but sometimes they want to like monitor the market in a very deep way and find like every single new person or every single new company that is matching a specific criteria, or building this like multi-step agent that can go research the web, compile information, and go do another search and kind of then produce an end thing. So that ends up taking a little bit longer. But there's also these very interesting decision-making processes. So like, for example, there's a few customers that are coding agents where they almost like build the decider first on when to even search. So like, is this query that the user's writing, is this answerable, let's say, just with an LLM, or do you even need search? And then kind of like having that decision-making process of like, yes, let's go fetch a technical doc to ground this answer so that the code has a higher chance of being successful because you're looking at this doc versus not. So that's I think another thing we're seeing a lot of is this like step of first a search decider, and it's not like 100% of the time that it searches. And then the kind of like search steps on how to kind of like build that query and what content to absorb.
And here, when we talk about search, the object it's always text, or there's also like multimodality with sounds, videos, images, and things like that.
So far just text. Basically the way that people can customize it is they can pull the link, they can abstract the whole text off of the pages or just like snippets off of them or already pre-processed answers. So some people already want more of already I want Exa to do the work and just give me the answer. So we then do the absorbing of all the information, processing of it, and just returning either like a structured output answer that's very specific. So like a lot of data enrichment use cases use this more agentic intelligent structured output form or more like free form, just like answer format.
So even with text, it's already like a ton of data.
Yes.
Most of the time when I say, tell me books about sci-fi, I want to like sci-fi stuff. You can give me more books that I'm able to read. So it's not enough. You just like, you see, like there are all these books, like the search is perfect. Like the answer is like, these books are sci-fi. It's like, well, can you rank them? Like, can you give me the relevant ones?
Mm.
And with the web, what we did was like, well, the more pointings you have, the better. And then the more, that was the initial version with PageRank. And then they already jumped to, well, actually, if they pay us, like we are able to put it here. And then like the more links they click, like we are able to charge per ad. So let's prioritize that. How does ranking in Exa works? Like when you are doing embedding stuff, how can you rank? Not only like this document is relevant, it's like when you bring all the relevant ones, like the top 10 that I need to read.
hmm So first, I think we train our own re-ranker. So there's a lot of work being done on our research team on how to do that re-ranking. But I think another thing that's a very interesting insight and a fundamental difference between a consumer search and something like Exa is on Google, if the first result is not the right result for you, that's really bad. Like, yeah, you as a consumer expect to click on basically that first one or two links. With something like Exa, because our information is not being fed directly to you as a consumer, right? It's most likely going to an LLM that then they're doing the judgment and kind of the pre-processing depending on what you asked for and returning the answer. The right results need to actually be in the top 10, which is what the LLM will absorb. And then they will kind of do that decision making oftentimes on their side with a lot more of the context that was previously in your chat or in whatever system you're the logic changes a little bit from Google, which is why also you don't see as much of a lot of the Google top results. For example, if you search for the cool AI startups that do robotics, would be like a listicle. So it would be a mini article that has kind of a summarization within it, or it would be like a Reddit thread. It wouldn't be like the raw primary information, right? You wouldn't actually get the answer of like the startups that match that, because they know that users want that summarization. In the case of LLMs, in the case of Exa, we understand that the LLM actually wants the primary data. So we're way more interested in how do we optimize this re-ranking system and the logic behind our search to respond with the actual companies and the company homepages, and then let the LLM write that last summarization layer. So it's a lot more, let's say, raw data and like primary information than the Google style type results, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that for many non-believers, like they're going to switch in the next 5 years because they have been so much trained to think like, okay, search is Google. So whenever we talk
Mm-hmm.
about search, it's like, well, what do you do different from Google? Why can Google do this? But in reality, search is like a huge, huge problem. And then Google here is not even a competitor. Like you are like
Yeah, exactly.
approaching totally different market, but it's a market that did not exist like 10 years ago. Like because we
Not
didn't
even
have.
a year ago, like barely a year ago. Like I remember, no, you're spot on. And I think, by the way, like that's what I always try to explain. It's like we're not competing with Google. Like the reality is our customers maybe are competing with Google because it's like search is going to go from this thing that people are also used to going to Google to query to actually being embedded in a bunch of different experiences. Rather it's you as a knowledge worker or you as a consumer. And you're going to have these agents and these like, let's say AI applications that do search within them. So I think it's way more those AI applications kind of competing with Google for traffic than us. Like we're more trying to power those capabilities, right? And I think on that point that search is much, much bigger than Google. I think also, again, on the point of incentives, like the market is so large and there's so many different problems, many problems to be solved within search that you can't have a one solution fits all. Like Google is an amazing solution for consumers and has been for the past 20 years. And I actually think it'll take a long time for Google to go away, though I would die to see a conversation between the head of Gemini and the head of Google Ads. But I think, yeah, you need even like different style of searches and different like search solutions for different angles of those problems. So totally.
Yeah, and I think that many people will realize that because right now we are still in the era of intelligence is exploding, everything is becoming intelligent. So,
Mm-hmm.
like many people, like we want to daydream, like, okay, like I want to be able to speak to my printer and things like that, or to my fridge. But reality is that intelligence by itself is not enough. Like most of the time you need knowledge, and for that you need like content that has to come from somewhere. Many people still think that intelligence is all you need. You can see no, like if we bring Newton back and we explain him like current mathematics with the knowledge from now, having the same intelligence that he had, he will be able to keep deriving stuff. But he couldn't do it before because he had the lack of having it in the context.
Yeah.
Right now, most of the applications are like building the context, like crafting it by the developer that built the app. So we
Hmm.
say like, well, all three can do a lot. You just need to put the right content in. And you're like, okay, so how do you put the right content? It's like, well, I make sure that I search the files and put them there. But that's going to be a step extra that I want the machine do itself. Like, I don't want to think how I can bring the right content. I want the
Yeah.
machine to like search for the content and load it to the context.
Totally. And I think that it took people a while to understand the difference between knowledge and intelligence. And I think that the simplest example I always use is like, would you want a super high IQ person that has not been trained as a doctor to operate on you? Like, no, right? It's like, of course not. Like, and it's so obvious, but it's kind of the same thing. It's like we're expecting this system that is highly logical and intelligent to be able to give us answers on a bunch of things that it doesn't have the context on and it doesn't have the knowledge on. The reality is the way that, let's say, current LLMs and current like ML was set up is you also see this degradation in performance the bigger the context, right? Like, so you can't also have, so far, like hopefully people crack this like infinite context window, but we don't see a scenario anytime soon in which these LLMs have the full context of the web and know everything and have everything memorized and are able to perfectly retrieve exactly what they want whenever they want. So there will still be this need of them accessing the web and accessing the right information. And by the way, I actually even am very excited for how do they query not just the web, but other types of data. So I think that's also something that we spend a lot of time thinking about is sure, like we're starting with searches over the web because they think the web is the largest repository of human information. But a lot of interesting data is actually private or it's hidden behind paywalls, let's say, or it's internally in a company, or there's all these very interesting data sets that imagine if you could actually combine them with searching over the web, right? So I think in a future world, it's going to be this like very interesting problem of retrieval of yes over the web, but also over lots of other types of data. There's other players like I don't know like Glean that I find very fascinating, and I love what they're building, and it's super cool to see. I think our end customers combining things like Glean with Exa, and yeah, how do you query your internal documents, but also how do you query Exa, and kind of like combine those two things to have a perfectly knowledgeable answer in AI systems. So that's like one example.
A query in Exa, what does it return for the LLM? It's some kind of report? Is it stored like in a
Mhm.
database that has some structure? How does that work?
So for it's fully customizable actually by developers. So you can either we have basically four endpoints. So we have an endpoint where you can ask for just URLs or for URLs and the full content of those pages. So like literally just like full markdown text. We also have an answer endpoint that already does a lot of like the pre-processing, let's say, and can return either a report or whatever format of answer you want. And then we have a research endpoint that can do a bit more of this agentic style search to find things that are very hard to find and return a structured output in whatever format you want. So to give a simple example, like let's say you have a giant CRM at your company with thousands of companies and you want to be able to find and define like, okay, I want the name of the CEO. I want exactly a very short description in this exact format of their product. I want the number of employees that they have. I want to like all these different informations. And it doesn't just have to be firmographics. It can be kind of anything. You would use this more like intelligent search endpoint that can return a very specific format of what you want. So that's one example also.
And you have two titles, head of marketing and strategy. So
Yeah.
marketing, we already said like, well, this is hard because for most of the people, search is Google, and now they need to like they will learn the hard way. Well, Google is not what I want. There's this new kind of search that I need to do,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have to tell them like, well, have we new to you guys? Like, it's us. But also for strategy, what made you join a company? Like, how were you able to say like, okay, yeah, this problem looks like interesting. Let's jump and help the company succeed. Like, how was that story?
Great question. I actually I mean, I've been in the startup space for a while. I had spent most of my career on the application layer and consumer sides. But I think after ChatGPT 3 came out, I became obviously obsessed with this problem of AI. And I was like, I need to be in the center of this. And a lot of my decision-making process was actually, was like, I want to join something infra. I want to join a company that's actually building a true differentiated moat and kind of like selling the shovels in the gold rush. And I ended up meeting Will, the founder of Exa, and was so impressed, I think, by the scale of problem that he was tackling and the way that he was also thinking about it and investing very early on a research team and building a true technical moat. And that really excited me of being able to almost like work with then a lot of these very interesting application layer startups that are building really cool things and seeing how search and AI are combined to kind of make all of this happen. So that really, really excited me. And I think that, let's say that the strategy component was fascinating because yes, it's a very large problem, but it was not obvious a year ago, especially because a year ago, not everyone was talking even about AI agents. So when we said, yeah, we're building a search engine for AI agents, not many people got it, to be totally honest. Like now it's obvious, but a year ago it definitely wasn't. And I think we saw this world early on of like, yeah, agents are going to be searching the web more than humans very soon. And all of the systems today are not set up for that. Like Google, Bing are not set up for that. So how do we build the first search engine for that use case and to basically be able to power this world where AI is distributed everywhere? So I think that was a lot of the logic.
Yeah, like the mission is incredible. Then how you solve the problem, like it's a problem that has been open forever and it will be open like forever. So like you're going to keep like improving search, and you're going to never run out of work on that. But then there is like the infrastructure kind of
Hmm.
problem that it's like, well, for the web, it's at scale. Like it's actually for all the knowledge of the world. Like you cannot do it for a subset. So that's already like complicated. But also even the product, like what the product is going to change. So you're an infra company, but you also spend like, I guess, a lot of resources on research, because it's not like when the cloud arrived, what we did was saying like, well, we already know what kind of components we want. We want like virtual machines. We want databases. They already exist. Now we
Hmm.
need to put them in the cloud. Now, in your case, it's infrastructure of a product that it's not clear yet. Like the product is going
Hmm.
to change. It's like, well, we want LLMs to search. How do you like internally put the effort or decide where to put the effort? What part needs to be research? What part product? What part infrastructure?
Yeah, very good question. So I think, first of all, we've been big believers in being a research first organization from the start. So like we spend millions of dollars on a cluster because we wanted to be able to have access to a lot of compute, to be able to do a lot of R&D and truly like discover breakthroughs in search, right? Like a lot of the things we're doing have never been done before, like, and have never been done at this scale. And there are very few companies out there that have their own index and are building their own models. The majority of them, even like providers within search, wrap platforms like Google. So, and then you end up having all the limitations that Google has, but you also end up having a bunch of other limitations, like you can't do true like zero data retention and you can't serve certain like low latencies because you're constrained by the systems that you wrapped. So we invested very heavily on research. And I would say in the beginning, it was almost like not disproportional to our stage, but we were definitely like really focusing resources on that, on like even proportionally on the team. A lot of our engineering resources are dedicated to research. So that was very intentional though. And I think now we're seeing a lot of that pay off. So for example, we started seeing this big surge in use cases within finance or things like consulting or even like government. And a lot of other providers that didn't invest on building their own index or training their own models can serve those use cases from like a privacy perspective or a level of latency perspective. So there are things that we took bets on early on that maybe at the time we didn't even have the use case to justify, but that now we're seeing a lot of the benefits come of it, I would say. So that's one. And then I think in terms of product, we also, I think obviously have been very attuned to how are people using this and what are the use cases right now that are very, very valuable to people. So for example, last year, one of the things that we noticed was a lot of customers were using search, not just to plug it into their products, but actually internally. So they were using search to power things like their sales intelligence or to power market research or to power recruiting because the platform like Exa is so good at finding things like people or companies. So we're like, oh, this is interesting. Like, why don't we actually look into this more? So I spent a ton of time last year doing a million user interviews and understanding like, okay, what is these like internal search problems that people are going through? And that's actually where a lot of websets came from. So websets came from like, okay, how do we, so basically for those that don't know, websets is actually our second product. So our first product is the API. Websets basically is this like agentic search tool that can help find and enrich anything on the web, especially things that are like very, very hard to find. And it came from a lot of this user research on understanding like, yeah, you also have all these people that don't necessarily want to build a custom solution or dedicate engineering resources, but they also need to find very hard things. And how do we serve them? So the idea is, yes, let's use our search in the back end and combine it with very intelligent agentic workflows on top of it to return a perfect list that is fully validated of exactly what you want. So I had given the example of software developers, but let's say you want to find healthcare startups in the US with founders that are doctors that have raised more than $15 million and released a new product in the last year, as an example. You could never find that answer before, but with websets, you can. So it's super powerful. And it was funny because in the beginning, when we released this, we had a few players in the space kind of, not even like competitors, but that potential customers that even like tried to build it themselves. And they were like, wait, this is actually really hard to build. So now they're using it to power a bunch of their workflows. So we've, I think, transitioned a bit from having such a stiff stance on like, no, let's just build APIs into like the world has this multitude of needs for search and how do we serve all of these needs, rather it's a ready-made agent that's out of the box that people can use, or rather it's like this really fast, low latency API.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. With websites, I think that you may be on the path of doing something like spreadsheets. So at the beginning, we had computers, and we were like, well, how do I deal with financial data? And people have like some kind of reports, and you just dump it there, and that's the thing. Or you run a program and you get a number, and then someone said like, no, we need to put it in this format. And then actually cells can interact with each other, and then they can be reactive, and boom, like they invented something that is like incredible. I think that for search, that piece is still missing. So this idea of when you search for things, you're not going to find them in one place. Like most of the searches are going to trigger the assembling of what you are looking for. So you're not going to find the result and it's like, this is what I was looking for. You're going to have to assemble it. And websites look a lot like something that goes in this direction.
For sure. And it actually looks like a spreadsheet. Like it is a matrix. Like the output of it is literally a sheet that has rows with the results. And then you can see all of the different sources. And sometimes we use like 50 sources. We look at 50 sources to like validate if one row is correct. And then you can basically, the cool thing is you can also add a bunch of columns. So let's say once you validated, like, yes, this company fits all this criteria that I want, but you're like, okay, now I want more information on it. So I want to find their CTO and I want to find his background, but I also want to find a summary of their product. Also, like, read all of their docs and tell me this information about them. And also tell me all of their investors and how many employees they have. So you can kind of like keep going and filling all of this different information about an entity. And there's so many use cases in the real world for how people are using more of this like structured matrix type data. Think like sales, recruiting, market research, investors looking for companies, or even like us as people looking for stuff. Like I look for things like, I don't know, case studies all the time. There's like a million things that you can find, but I think there is a lot that is not, like ChatGPT even style queries tend to be like long lists or report style things. And there's so many use cases, especially like for knowledge workers that require this like cleaner kind of sheet data form. So yeah, super excited to see websites go in that direction. And it's still very early stages. We released it like maybe 4 or 5 months ago. So in a year from now, it's going to be, wow, I can't even imagine where it's going to be.
Yeah. So how are you using it internally? Like, what do you use it for?
We run pretty much all of our recruiting and all of our outbound sales now on websites, which is crazy. And actually research paper finding is another cool use case. So like anyone that inbounds us, we can do all of this research using it. Any segments that we're like, oh, this would be so cool as a use case. How do we outbound these people? We use websites to find all the companies that match these criteria and also like the exact people to reach out to at all of these companies, which is super cool. And then for recruiting, we're very picky with recruiting, like insanely, insanely picky. And we basically run all of these different searches, finding people with very specific types of experience or very specific skill sets or combinations of skill sets using websites and basically use it to outbound to them too. So there's a million things. And we do like research paper reading every Thursday here at Exa as well. As I was mentioning, we're very like research first. So I think even like monitoring for new research papers that are released around the topics that are interesting to us is something that we use it for. So I don't know, you can run even a search like, oh, find me research papers published by top PhD programs that specifically talk about retrieval or embeddings or vector spaces. And then you can set up a monitor that basically continuously scans the web for if new ones are released for them to pop up as well. So it's cool because anything that's very like time sensitive or that requires like this freshness can be scanned for continuously. Rather, it's like every day, every week, every month. So it helps with a lot of that alerts, let's say.
Has it happened already that you see a client of yours using websites and you're like, they're using it in such a way that you're like, damn it, I need to adapt that workflow?
100%, like all the time. That's what's actually blown my mind. People are so creative with it. And I think what's been really, really cool to see is how fast people changed their mindset and retrained how they search. So like what we were talking about in the beginning of, there's going to be this retraining of consumer behavior of like everyone was searching in Google style queries of like short keywords. And how do you transition to this very like semantic understanding type search and all the creative things you can do with it? So I'll give a fun example. So we had a customer that sells sponsorships for a sporting team, like a big sporting team. And they wanted to specifically reach out to CEOs and CMOs of consumer goods companies that used to play college sports themselves. And then they wanted to customize the messaging to them based on like which team they played for in college or even like high school. You can never find this information, right? So it's so cool because you can then return a list that, yeah, all of these CEOs and CMOs that's played college sports tagged by if they played like baseball or soccer or football or basketball and like the name of their like high school team or their college team. So it's super cool. And that I think was one that blew my mind. I'm like, wow, people are getting so creative and there are all these very nuanced criteria or things that you would never be able to like tick a box in a LinkedIn search or an Apollo or whatever to find that person. But now you can type whatever you want and we can solve it. So it's super cool.
Yeah, I think that that's going to happen for a long while because it's this idea that this is a new like UI for search results, especially.
Mhm.
Even the person that invented it or the company that comes up with it. At the beginning, you don't imagine how big it will be, or you have some dreams and then like
Completely.
it's just like bigger. There is something like
Yeah,
really interested in websites.
totally.
So something that is also curious for me is like we talk about research and then about the product, but also you said that you build your own cluster. So how do you find the skills to like actually build a cluster yourself? Like it's as easy as I can just order the GPUs in Amazon and just assemble them in my backyard, or how was that process?
So, I mean, I don't know if we can take credit for the assembling, but we basically just decided to buy it so that we own that compute and can allocate it and use it however we want instead of like renting it out from like a third party provider. So we basically worked with um, a company that kind of like owns these big cluster centers and then we just like bought the what we call Exa Cluster. It's also funny because the name Exa means like 10 to the 18th. So we also love to play play with that logic. But yeah, it's something that we decided to invest in as a company super early on. And some people thought that we were crazy for it, but honestly, it's been super utilized at all times. We're even like constrained, I would say, a little bit at times with the Exa Cluster currently. So we'll need to maybe expand it.
And many times it's hard to utilize the compute if you don't know what to do with it, but you have like
Hmm.
infinite use cases. So you're going to always be constrained of if I have more compute. It's like Google. Google doesn't say like, well, we have these data centers that they are just lacking. I wish someone came for them. It's like, no, no, like if you're a
That's
research
right.
company and you have products and you want to like pre-process a lot of stuff, if you give me more compute, I will take it.
For sure. We're gonna have the team starting to like fight over computer. I have to like segmented in a more structured way very soon.
I can imagine them like creating the websites of why their part of the organization is the one that needs this.
That deserves the compute.
I can see that happening. Perfect. So how many people are in Exa right now, and how do you project like the growth?
So we are, I think, 28 right now, but we're growing very quickly. So I joined, I think I was probably, we were seven, maybe 7 or 8. And now we're 28. And by the end of this next quarter, we want to be 55. So growing very quickly, hiring a lot. We've been spending a lot of time, even as a team, on recruiting. I mean, when I joined, I actually spent pretty much 2 months, I would say, nearly fully dedicated to recruiting. So we went to even like NERPs in Canada, ACL in Thailand to recruit folks, all of the different university career fairs to find the best folks. And we have a very structured process. I don't know if you even saw when, I don't know, this is a funny remark, but I don't know if you saw that viral tweet of the guy that was working at like 20 different SF startups at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He actually interviewed with us and he came to do a work trial with us and he didn't pass, which showed our like robustness of our process. Like the team is super particular with it. We do a bunch of technical interviews. We do on-site work trials for everyone. So definitely keeping the bar high, but we need to grow quickly because we have a lot to build. And we luckily have a ton of resources to dedicate to this awesome mission and problem. So yeah, looking to grow super quickly.
Something interesting about Exa is that you actually have like multiple modes. Having a good mission statement, it's a good mode because important people want to work like in important things, or like good
You're
people
right.
work. So that's a mode on itself. But then it's
That's
like
true.
a mode to the square because it's like, well, if you attract talent, well, talented people actually like to work with other talented people. So you already
Mhm.
have two things there that they are recharging. Then you have infrastructure, could be another mode that you are leveraging. Are these like the three big modes that you would say like the company has? Would you like remove any or add any other?
No, I think all those make sense. And definitely, by the way, the mission statement part is something that I think I underestimated before joining. Like I always cared deeply about like the missions of the company I worked at, but I wasn't sure on like a market level how that went. And I think now, I mean, you're seeing these like talent wars here in Silicon Valley for people. And I think it's so clear that talent is the thing that you need to focus on to really make a company succeed. And hiring the best people is, I think, honestly, harder than ever. So if you're not having an interesting problem for people to work on, that becomes 10 times harder. And your company, I think, is going to struggle a little bit more to grow, especially in that early phase. So definitely, I think that is a huge differentiator. I think obviously the technology we view as a huge moat of something that requires true breakthroughs and that we have, let's say, an element of secret sauce. It's not just about building, it's truly like discovering. That's one. And second is, I think, actually distribution and brand. I think we've also invested a lot in our brand, not even from like a resourcing perspective, but in just like really caring about it. And I think especially focusing on how do we build a strong brand within the developer community. So like Twitter is huge for us. We love Twitter. And we've always, I think, been super mindful of this developer audience and how do we make like amazing docs? How do we jump into MCP very quickly? How do we make the developer experience the best possible? Because that matters so much. And that brand ends up being a huge differentiator as we grow. I think anything that we do ends up multiplying if you have a strong brand. So that's, I think, something we're super, cognizant of. And so far we've grown, I would say, 95% inbound, which is a huge benefit as a company. So I think nailing that distribution and how do you combine like product-led growth, this like strong developer community, and then being able to still move up market and serve really big companies matters a ton. And without, I think, this distribution mode, we wouldn't be here.
The talent it's really useful for hiring other talent, but many times it's hard to like sell it to like the end client. So end clients assume
Mhm.
like, yes, you have a talented team. Of course, if not, I will
Totally.
not go with you. But right now, what do they care about? Like when you have to sell Exa to a company or when they reach out, what are they looking for? How do they know that they need Exa?
That's a great question. I think it changed a lot actually. So in the beginning, right when I joined, I think we would see a lot of companies come in not knowing what they wanted to build. So almost like, oh, I have a mandate to build AI. What do I do? And it was a lot more of a broad ask, and they even didn't know exactly what they wanted to build. Now I think we see a lot more companies coming in with a very clear idea of this is the problem, this is what I want to build. I need search. Like it's clear that they need data and they need search, and the data is a moat for them. So our job is way more how do we serve them to the best of our ability. And a lot of the things they tend to care about are like one, customization. So like how flexible is this? Like how much can their developer team customize it to the exact use case that they have? Rather it's choosing like how many links they get, or if they want to crawl sub pages, if they don't, the latency, all this stuff. So customization is definitely one. Latency is actually another, depending on the use case. So we're investing a ton of resources now in actually releasing the fastest search API in the world, because for especially Asian use cases, right? If you think about it, if you need to do 20 searches, every little bit of latency that's higher compounds. So you really, really need to unlock low latency for a lot of use cases to even make sense. So that's one. And then this like privacy and data retention has been actually one that surprised me in how much it matters, but it's mattered so much for organizations, and that we can luckily offer because we built all the stack in-house. So because we own the model, we own the index, we can guarantee this privacy, which for a lot of customers matters way more than I ever imagined, I would say. So
For many people that work B2C before, they are surprised how much companies care about the things that made them important, and data is one of the things that makes them like more
yeah,
relevant. So they really don't
completely.
want to give it away. So yeah,
Totally.
privacy and zero retention, these kind of policies work really well overall for enterprises. For
Yeah,
a small
more for
startup,
enterprise.
they usually say that they care, but in reality is that they cannot
Yeah,
afford it.
no. For startups, I think a lot of what we see is this customization and also like easy integration. Like you need amazing docs. You need, developers experience that's amazing, and that they can go in, understand exactly what they need to do and set it up in a very intuitive way. And that ends up mattering a lot. It's like how fast can they go and implement it, and how much lift are you requiring from them? And I think we need to make it as easy as possible and as clear as possible to have a bunch of different use cases powered and a bunch of different people that sometimes we didn't even intended for that use case, but that they're being creative with it, and being able to figure out on their own how to use it in the right way.
Something that you mentioned that is really important, and most computer science miss or engineers, is performance, because they
Mm-hmm.
assume it's a solved problem. But with this idea of, well, a search is not just a search. Like now, a search is actually this assembling the result and needs to trigger a lot. Do you have many clients that already hit limits and like, well, we try to build stuff and it takes like 5 minutes and we want it in 20 seconds and they have to like parallelize it? Or what are the main bottlenecks there?
We've actually been talking a lot about performance. We actually threw an event even a couple weeks ago with like AWS, and then folks from like Modal and Anthropic and LansDB on like high performance engineering, like what this means in the age of AI. And I think what a lot of people maybe missed in the beginning and that now is becoming clear is performance is actually the bottleneck for a lot of use cases. Because if you can't use your compute efficiently, if you can't have low latency, a lot of things just won't make sense. They'll either be too expensive or too slow. And then when you have customers in the real world that need to pay for them, and that needs to work for their end users, it just doesn't make sense. So we're actually releasing it tomorrow. This is early, fresh out of the oven news, but we've invested a ton of resources on basically building the fastest search API in the world. And there are a few use cases when this matters. So either one, if you need instant answers for your end users. So especially for like B2C applications and things that the results need to be surfaced to a consumer very quickly. This matters so much. The second is if you have an agent that needs to do a lot of calls. So if you have 30 different searches to run, again, it like accumulates. So it matters a lot for that type of use case. And we basically invested in like bringing and training our own re-ranker to make it faster. We parallelize a bunch of stuff and a bunch of different things that I won't get into the details of on the research side to basically make this possible. But we wouldn't even be able to look at this problem if we didn't control our own stack, right? It's like if you don't own the stack, if you're a rapper, let's say, you just can't even begin caring about this type of thing because you can't change the intermediate steps that become the bottleneck or that become the thing that is like either slowing the system down or making it too expensive or whatever it is. So it's definitely super top of mind, not just for us. I think honestly, as the ecosystem, it's become clear that how do you optimize compute and how do you optimize speed, that matters a lot.
Yeah, and we're getting to the point that you cannot just blame it to the other parts of the stack. So usually you could say like, well, it's the LLM that it's slow. People don't care anymore. They say like, no, I know that it can be done faster. We have like Grok and Cerebrus and things like that. So, like the more other parts of the system keep pushing for speed and performance, the more search is like, then like, well, let me see where we are being slow, and they pressure for more.
Totally. And I think, by the way, search is still the bottleneck in a lot of use cases. So think like voice agents, right? Like voice agents need to work instantly. Imagine like the weird lag if you're like on a customer service call and the agent needs to do a web search. So for those use cases, it, I think matters even more. And so far, search has been the bottleneck. Hopefully we'll keep improving it so that it's not.
100% you will. And then the last thing in this direction, it's evals. Like I guess that companies also care, or clients, about like, well, we have this thing, it's easy to integrate, it's extremely quick, but how do we know that it's doing what is required?
Totally. So I think evals are one of the hardest problems to solve and one of the most interesting ones actually, because I think so far, obviously, we've done all the like traditional evals, like even simple QA and all those benchmarks, but a lot of them don't end up being so practical, or they don't really represent how the world works and how search is being used in the real world. So I think we're actually excited to be able to focus a bit more time on how do we even like release our own benchmark, or how do we do evals on very specific use cases that are that we know our customers really care about and that we can test in this like real world scenario basically, instead of just this like theoretical scenario that no one really cares about or that won't actually make a difference to customers. So I think we're honestly on step one as a category of evals. And of course, like we always try to test everything that we're doing to show like, yes, it is, it's progressing internally, but also how it is it performing versus other players in the market. But I'm actually excited to even break outside of that logic and think more of how can you build evals that are just more useful and more real in how search is being used in the actual world.
Yeah, and search is such an important space that we need like leaders in that category that like are able to define from the feedback of actually like triggering searches how the
Yeah.
results should look like. It's something that it's really hard for academia to come up with, because you need like real usage. So you
Yeah.
need this kind of mix of like I have industry, we have like researchers, we have like all the compute, and then like keep pushing to how an eval for this
No,
looks like.
I was gonna say, I think with AI, especially now, you almost have access to data that also you've never had before. We have hundreds of millions of queries, right, that we've run. And that data is so interesting if you can look at like frequency of topics or how they're being used in terms of use cases and test for these really specific real world things. So I'm very excited to see what we can do with it. I think we've honestly barely begun to scratch the surface of it.
So we are now at the point in the interview that I need to ask the question. Thais, we have been talking for a while about AI agents, and
Mhm.
how Exa helps with search. But what's an AI agent?
What's an AI agent? I think an agent is basically a like framework that combines AI with a specific goal and basically allows it to take actions and make decisions. So it goes through the steps of planning, decision making, but actually being able to act more in the world. I think LLMs were a bit almost like isolated in a box, and agents almost break them out of that box and allow them to interact and to take more complex decisions or actions, basically. That's how I think about it.
Nice, it's a good one. We always have it in the website, and I am sure that after when we are at episode 100, we will be able to mix them together and have like the perfect definition of
That's so cool.
agents and agent categories. So I always like to end up with a couple of questions, one positive and one negative. One is like, what would you like to see more happening in the next 6 months?
Something I would like to see more in the next 6 months. I'm actually excited to see more consumer AI products. Like, I think we actually have not seen enough of them. There's been a lot of talk on like the B2B space and tools for knowledge workers, but there's so much that can be done in consumer that I don't think we've seen yet. And as someone that came from consumer, I'm really pumped to see how that evolves and how it just changes people's behavior. And instead of just like substituting things that we're used to doing, how it actually augments and allows us to do things that have never been possible before.
I think that with the rise, like right now, a lot of things that are consumer have been absorbed by ChatGPT. So for people still, when you think about AI, they say like, well, it's ChatGPT and it's this chat. And there's a couple of things that may change that it's they're related. One, it's AI, voice AI. It's getting better. And then the other one, it's like this race of companions that seems that people really,
Yeah.
really like. And I think that this cannot be absorbed by ChatGPT. Like I cannot imagine a furry in my ChatGPT telling me stuff. So, like it will have to be a specific app. So I think that that's something that you will see in the next 6 months.
I completely agree on the companion side. I think there's one other thing, which is I think the beauty of ChatGPT is you can do anything with it, but it's also the flip side of it is you can do anything with it. Meaning, I think a lot of people almost don't have on their own the framing or the creativity in the moment to know what to use it for. So I think there's a lot of space for apps that are for specific purposes and use cases to show up because then users will go into that app with that framing and that specific thing in mind. And ChatGPT is almost like so open-ended that people might not use it then for certain use cases that they're not thinking of in that moment. So I think there is a lot of room for consumer applications that are more like purpose specific still.
100%. It's like a computer. You cannot just give a
Yeah.
computer to people and say like, okay, this can do
Yeah,
everything. You need to give a
exactly.
computer
It's
with
like,
an app.
you're like, okay, I can do everything, but also anything. Like, I don't know.
And on the negative side, what would you like to stop seeing?
I think I would like to stop a bit this like reluctance on AI. I think a lot of people, especially in like the, let's say, more real world outside of this SF bubble, are still very skeptical of it. And I think AI will be this force that will increase inequality a lot. I think it will like lead to extremes of a lot of people like accumulating a lot and then the people that don't catch on actually staying behind. And I don't want people to stay behind. So I think I would like to have a bit more of a positive reception of AI and at least like how can we put it in the hands of people to so that they can use it in the best way possible. So yeah, I think that's something I'm excited to see is more people taking advantage of it.
I think that that's going to happen, but it's going to be slow. So in 6 months, we're going to see like more reception, but it's going to be like a long fat tail of people that when people don't like changes. And I think that as you point properly, is like AI, it's the biggest change that we will probably see as a society and as, like everyone in life. I always thought that it was going to be my grandpa that went from living in a farm with electricity to, like we have like each one has a car and you just like push a button and things happen in a screen. And now I think that it's going to be our generation, which is pretty crazy.
It's crazy to think about. But at the same time, I think people here in SF talk a lot about like, oh, like AGI is arriving in like X number of years. And then whenever I get outside of this bubble and I travel or I go back home to Brazil or meet with different friends that are not in this tech space, you realize how far AI is still from the day-to-day lives of most people. And I think it will take longer to adapt than we anticipate. So yeah, how do we just get in the hands of people faster for good use cases? So
Excellent, Thais. So thank you very much. If
of
people
course.
like this episode, like the company, and want to learn more about it, where should they go?
Yeah, so you can either follow us on Twitter, by the way. It's actually our most fun content's always on Twitter. So it's Exaai Labs. And our website is just exa.ai if you want to learn more as well.
Okay, is there any website to find like the best contest of Exa?
Oh, that's actually a good one. I have not run that yet, but I need to get on that because we have lots of awesome like tweets and case studies and LinkedIn posts, but it's scattered everywhere. So I'll have to run.
Excellent. So thank you very much for joining, Thais. Looking
Thanks, Ty.
forward to our next chat.
This was awesome.